Well, hey there, guys. I'm Max the Beast of ZeldaEngine.net, and I want to talk to you about Skyward Sword, but specifically two, criticisms the game receives that, in my eyes, are factually completely false. This is not me blindly praising the game. This is not a praise video, really. It is more just a collection of facts and counter-arguments to these two things that are brought up about the game. And I guess you can disagree with these if you want, but I really don't see how there's a rational way to do so, not to insult anyone who disagrees, but I'm just saying that this is a pretty concrete argument. There are pretty concrete arguments against these two statements. So I'll get the one that I've actually covered a bit before out of the way first. And that is the idea that, or the statement that Skyward Sword's motion controls are unresponsive. Now, this is something that I think the GameSpot or whatever site it was review, the big infamous one that gave the game a fairly low score and everyone was freaking out about. That one, yeah, I think they said that, and some fans have echoed this. Now, the problem with this is the fact that some people, including myself, have managed to get the controls to work pretty much fine almost all the time. If it's unresponsive, it can't suddenly be responsive for certain people. That doesn't make sense. The fact that there are people who can get the controls to work means that it's not unresponsive, it's just hard to get to respond how you want it to. I mean, if it's not responding for most people, but it's responding for a few, that means that those few are able to figure it out, and it means that it's just too hard to figure out how to make it respond. That's not the controls being unresponsive, that's the controls being unintuitive. It's just too hard to figure out how they're supposed to work. That's a different that's a completely different criticism. Calling it unresponsive is completely improper because they're just not. There's no way to argue past that point because there are people who get it to work fine without errors and without, problems. But to argue it's unintuitive, I mean, I disagree because I was able to figure them out, but that's a very personal thing for me, and if other people weren't able to get it to work, well, obviously they weren't able to get it to work, and it just wasn't fun for them. So that's a valid criticism, regardless of whether I disagree with it. I've actually covered this a bit, saying mostly the same thing in some editorials, which are like miniature article, news post, question things on the site. I actually did two, one more or less saying that, and one where I actually gave tips for common problems people have. I'll link in the description, but enough of that. The other one, and this is actually the main point I want to make with this video, this is the big thing that kind of has been bugging me, made me want to make this, is the idea that Skyward Sword has sold poorly. And this is really hilarious because it's not based on, anything at all in any way. Because, I mean, I just checked the numbers. I literally just checked it just before doing this video, just to make sure I had this straight, because this is what I knew before, but I just wanted to double-check and have the concrete numbers. If I'm remembering the exact number correctly, Ocarina of Time sold about 7 million copies worldwide in its entire lifespan. It was over 7 million, but it was around that rough area. Twilight Princess sold around the same, but higher, and it's actually the best-selling Zelda game of all time. And that was after 5 years, so it actually got that status quicker than Ocarina of Time did, somewhat more impressive, possibly. But bottom line is, it is the best-selling Zelda game of all time, but it achieved that status in about 5 years. Now, Skyward Sword has sold over 3 million, and it hasn't been out a year. It's got several more months to go before it's out a year. So that's really hilarious that someone could say, I mean, it's kind of funny to say it's selling poorly right now anyway, because it hasn't reached, the heights of any other Zelda game, and it can't yet. But the fact is that it's already sold half as much as the best-selling Zelda game of all time. That means that's a pretty good score, and you know that number is going to keep growing and growing. Now, this is something that there are arguments that other people have proposed beyond that, aware of those numbers, to justify the idea that it sold poorly. And I think one of them is that it didn't have the hype. It didn't have the hype that Twilight Princess did. To say Skyward Sword didn't have hype is really another really weird statement. That's just not true. It had a lot of hype building it up. Arguably not over the same length of time as Twilight Princess did, but at the same time it had it, and it's kind of weird to argue about hype with the Zelda series anyway, considering that the series is so major and it's so hyped in itself all the time. Everyone wants the latest Zelda game, that's that kind of phenomenon, so it's kind of weird to argue that in the first place. And even so, even if Twilight Princess got hyped more, that's an abstract statement that you can't necessarily connect directly to numbers. And another argument I hear is that that the game, that Twilight Princess was actually released on 2 consoles, more or less. It got, you know, like, it released at the end of the GameCube, but it also got to be released on the Wii. Now, it's true that it sold better on the Wii, but there's another thing here, is that Skyward Sword is more or less in the exact same place. I mean, think about it. Twilight Princess was basically ported from the GameCube to the Wii. I mean, that's not exactly how the release played out, but that's the technicality of the situation. It was a GameCube game also put on the Wii. Now, Skyward Sword is a game, a Wii game, released at the tail end of the Wii, with the motion controls, which the Wii U, which is about to come out pretty soon here, is confirmed to use, and Nintendo has been recently always making sure the console has backwards compatibility with the last system. So, basically, that's an almost direct confirmation that we can play Skyward Sword on the Wii U. And this is planning-wise, this would make a lot of sense, considering that, well, they released it at the end of the Wii's lifespan. And it's a major Zelda release. They're clearly, at least in my mind, maybe that's conjecture on my part, clearly in my mind, it seems like that they're releasing it for a dual console release in the same way. Not quite exactly the same, but I don't think that it's going to slow down any more than Twilight Princess did, or any other Zelda game does, as it keeps going. And even so, that's saying something's going to happen for certain without actual concrete evidence of that fact. And that is conjecture. Whether or not my previous statement was or not, that definitely is conjecture, and you can't say that it's sold poorly. It's sold very well for its time, and it has been stated by Nintendo to be the fastest-selling Zelda game of all time. So, you can't just say that it's sold poorly. It hasn't. It's sold well. You can say that it might sell poorly, but you still don't have evidence to back that up. So, you know, if you can, it's fine if you want to think that it's going to sell poorly. There are some ways you could think that. There's ways you can justify that theory, but it's not a concrete theory. It's not a concrete theory any more than the motion control thing is a valid statement to say it's unresponsive. I mean, if it didn't respond for you, that means you didn't get it to work right, because other people got it to work right. So yeah, feel free to disagree. You know, I hope you've at least considered my points, but feel free to disagree, give your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.